And welcome, family, to another installment of Metaphysics on Your Mind. We are going through Noah's flood. We're going to finish it up in this installment, and we'll just pick up, for the most part, pick it up where we left off. But let's see. We were at Genesis 8. And let's pick it up. Let's pick it up back in Genesis 8:1, and this is where God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the ark. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of 150 days, the waters were abated. Okay, we'll come back to that. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Okay, and then the waters decreased continually. We're still reading in Genesis 8:5. Until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. Okay, so let's stop there. So again, we're kind of, rolling deep in metaphor and numerology. So when it's talking about the waters, remember I think we left off in the last installment, and we were discussing that the waters aren't actual water, but this is all happening within the mind, right? The waters are the outpouring from God. Basically, the flood is the flooding of the mind with the spirit, God's spirit. So in other words, when you go into meditation, we said before, of the stages of consciousness, you start here, and these are the 4 elements, right? And there's another element which we haven't discussed a lot yet. We'll get to that when we come back in the next sequence. It's called the ether, which we'll discuss more. It's just, we're trying to compress this in a way that there's an understanding can be had, maybe not a complete or full understanding of this verse by verse, because again, you could spend years in this book, but we're just trying to establish that in meditation, as we talked about before, you start from here, you start from beta, 24 cycles per second, and then the water, in this case the flood. In the New Testament, it's going to be baptism. It works all the same. It's the spirit that raises you, and in this case, what we're maintaining, or what we're saying is that we're proposing that the flood, the whole story, is about you, each one of us trying to find a place of rest. And the rest, of course, is rest from ourselves, okay, from our minds. And that's what the no thought and the watching meditation is about. It's about you starting from here and you rising, right? When the flood comes, what does it do? What does it do? It raises the water level, right? So you rise in meditation. This is all metaphor. And again, we're talking about, the elements that also represent the stages of consciousness. Okay. So the flood comes, it rains for 40 days, 40 nights, or whatever. The 40 is not the important part. Remember, this is numerology. The Noah flood story, there's a lot of numerology. 40 days and 40 nights. In numerology, you drop the zeros, right? At least 4. That's telling you it's talking about the 4 elements and the 4 stages of consciousness. So it's also talking about the spiritual, right? The emotional, the intellectual, and the physical. Okay? So going into the ark is you going within yourself, taking the physical, taking all the hurt, the pain, the constant thoughts, the emotions, the mixed feelings, all of that gets taken into the ark, into yourself. In meditation, you're going within, okay? And when you're under assault, when the heavens open up and the waters get rough, meditation is basically saying you're going within yourself. And remember when we read in one of the other installments where the verse said, when ye pray, go into thy closet which is in secret and close the door. Well, that's exactly what happens in the ark. Noah closes the door. You close the door on the outside, on the external, okay? And what you're taking in with you is the physical, because the physical needs to be transformed. As we've just been reading about, the mind has become corrupted, right? The mix of the sons of God and the daughters of men, the higher and the lower, the mind has been corrupted. You're completely besieged with this chaos. And so now there has to be a cleansing. So the whole story is about going into meditation. This is what we're proposing, is going into meditation, rising from all the chaos. The flood comes, the rains come, and you rise with the sea level, right? So you're rising up, and because this is a spiritual flood, the waters become God's truth. And God's truth then brings you up into the air, what we spoke about before, where there's the verse where it says, and you shall meet Jesus in the air. And that's talking about when you go up above the thoughts, when you go above the thoughts of the mind and above the emotions, right? And now you're moving up to the spirit. We said that was beta, alpha, theta, delta. 24 cycles, 14 cycles, 8 cycles, 4 cycles. The brain activity slows down. You rise up into meditation. You get touched by the renewal of the spirit. But in this story, we've moved up. As we know, the ark rested on Mount Ararat. Okay, so Mount Ararat, it's always a high place. You'll notice in all these stories that, whether we're talking about Moses or we're talking about Christ or we're talking about all these different characters, always have to go to the high country, as it's called. And that just means the higher mind. Within you, you're rising into that which is the higher, that which is connected to God, okay? So this story is about going in, receiving, where you separate from thoughts and you rise above the physical, okay? And then you rest on the mountain. That's the higher mind. That's Mount Ararat. Remember, Noah means rest. And the rest is from yourself. It's from the mental activities of your own mind. In other words, it's not This is not a public thing. Meditation isn't a public thing. Everything is on an individual basis, because every mind that is in chaos then gets reflected out onto the earth or into the mesocosm, right? So everything in this story is saying that, hey, you've got to have, as Paul said, be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do you renew your mind? You renew your mind by taking it in. It gets a baptism in water. This is just another context. Rises up into the air above the thoughts of the mind, above all that, the stuff that's besieging you, and you rise up into nothingness. It's literally nothingness. That's the word for it. That's why I say you do nothing, right? It is all done for you once you do what you're told, which is to go into the ark or to go into your closet, shut the door. You take the physical with you by twos that are unclean. That's the duality of man. You take the other clean animals, quote unquote, by sevens. We said 9 was consciousness, right? Seven represents divine intervention. Right? This is all numerology, biblical numerology. 7 is divine intervention. 3 is new life, which only makes sense, right? Because if you look at the Trinity, or if you look at any family, you have a father, a mother, child, right? So we'll get more into numerology as we move forward. But the ones to really keep in mind, because we're going to come to them again and again. 9, consciousness. 7, divine intervention. 3, new life. We already said that 1 was God. 2 was you and God, or, depending upon the context, could be duality, right? So 4, the fourfold nature, the 4 elements. 5, because if we read back to how old was Moses when he gave birth, or when he had his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, we'll put it that way. It said Moses was 500 years old, right? Well, again, it's all numerology. 5 represents the 5 senses of sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, which represents the physical. Okay, so it's just another way of saying it. So Noah was 500 years old when he had Shem, Ham, and Japheth, his sons. All that's saying is that this is you and your 5 senses going into the ark, going into meditation to be cleansed, to be raised above all that troubles you. It's a place of rest. And as a matter of fact, I think we have, yeah, okay. And then, and Mount Ararat. Let's get that in. It says that the ark rested on Mount Ararat. Ararat, let's see if we can pull it up. Yeah, okay. So anyway, Ararat basically means in Hebrew, reversal of the curse. Reversal of the curse. Remember when God cursed the ground? Back when we were talking about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and then you had the generational curses. This is the reversal of the curse. Then the ark, which is you, Noah, finds a place of rest on Mount Ararat, the higher consciousness. And the name for Ararat is reversal of the curse. So that's how you cleanse, that's how you reverse the generational curse that you've inherited and that has accumulated during your lifetime, and that you presumably wouldn't want to pass on to your children. So again, this whole story is talking about you, and that there is a place of refuge, but it's within. It's not in a building out there. It's not in a system out there. It's already been provided you within. And then, for those who know the story, we're not going to go through all of it. We'll come back to Noah probably in the next sequence of stuff, because we're kind of going back and forth. But this whole story kind of takes place in a state of meditation. So then we get to see, we talked about, and it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, which we already discussed. The four elements, the fourfold nature, all of these go with you into the ark. When we come back around to Noah, we'll tie it more into the chakra system, because it's very important. We just don't have the time to go into it in this installment. But when it talks about the 7 days, and it says it 3 different times, the 7 days is talking about the 7 chakras of the body. Chakra, it actually comes from Sanskrit, so it comes from the East, comes from the Hindu, and chakra basically just means wheel of light, right? Wheels of light. So it is said, and I don't know if you can see it from the camera, but you can see the colors in this figure here at the very bottom. Tony, maybe you can zoom in a little bit on this section so I don't have to draw it up here. But chakra, wheel of light, when it talks about the 7 days, or anytime you hear about with 7, remember we said 7 meant divine intervention. Well, here is the covenant that God promised Noah, that he would set his bow in the cloud as a covenant, that he wouldn't destroy the earth again with water. Well, the 7 chakras each represent a color, the 7 colors of the color spectrum. From bottom to top, we have, on the very bottom, we have the sacrum, which is the word where the word sacred comes from, and that's red. And then we have the root chakra, which is orange. Then we have the navel chakra, which is yellow. The heart chakra, which is green. The light blue chakra is the throat chakra. The third eye chakra is this one here. You can see between the eyes, the indigo, and the violet would be the crown chakra. Okay, so like I said, when we come back, probably it'll end up being after the holidays, because we're going to probably take a break of the month of December. Well, part of the month of December and part of the month of January for about 4 weeks. We're going to take a break and kind of recharge, and we'll come back at it with everyone. So, hopefully you can be patient, for us to come back and pick it up. But basically, those 7 days is actually referring to the 7 chakras, just like in the creation stories. God did all the work on 6 days, on the 7th day rested. Well, remember, to get to the 7th chakra, the 7th chakra is called the crown chakra. Well, that's a place of rest. Just like God rested on the 7th day in the creation story, The same thing applies here. The seventh chakra, which in the Bible, we're going to go into when we go into the New Testament quite a bit, and when we talk about Revelation up ahead. But the chakras, the seven chakras, are synonymous with the seven churches that you've heard about in the New Testament, the seven candlesticks, okay, seven candlesticks, and the seven seals. All of these are the same name for the chakras. Because remember, this is ancient knowledge, and the knowledge would go from, like, say, ancient Kemet from Egypt and spread out, and then each group or tribe or culture or nation would take that knowledge and usually in most cases would reformulate that knowledge in a way that was unique to that culture and put them at the center of that particular mythology or mystical system, which that's how, how things move from region to region, right? They change the inflection of how it is expressed, but it's the same knowledge. Seven seals. Okay? And then we read on a little further. So remember, the seven, the clean animals that we take by sevens are those that have been purified by going up through the chakra system. And we're gonna, like I said, that's a whole nother avenue that we have to go down, but we're just kind of introducing it in the flood story, that all the references to seven is the seven churches. It's the same basic thing, okay? And then once you have risen in meditation and we'll get into what this sacred fluid is, cerebrospinal fluid, once that has been returned up to the crown, to the place of rest, there's a cleansing. So those animals, in other words, the mind, has become cleansed, okay? Those are the clean thoughts and the higher emotions, right? That have been purged, whereas the unclean are the dual, the ones that go by two. So it's all of it is allegory, okay? So we'll kind of finish off with, we talked about the bow in the cloud. The reason why there's a bow in the cloud, when you think of the cloud, we think about the sky, we think about the higher. The cloud represents the higher mind. The bow are the seven colors of the rainbow. The chakras are the same colors as the color spectrum. So when you moved the energy up to be cleansed, you are setting the bow, which is all seven colors, up into the cloud, which is the token of the covenant between God and man. Meaning that you're always going to have this system available to you for you to find a place of rest, for you to be cleansed, to be purified, all those terms. That's what it's referring to, right? You take your fourfold nature and you go through this process, which we're going to go into a lot more. This is just to kind of give you an overall framework if you're not familiar with it. And then we'll kind of wind it up. We'll come back with these other ones, but we'll kind of wind it up with the fact that, remember, Noah sent out a raven and he sent out a dove. Well, the raven never came back. When the waters were, subsided and they were looking for dry land, he sent out the raven and the dove. And the raven never returned, but the dove kept coming back because it found no place of rest. So he sent it out. I believe it was the third time he sent out the dove. Again, the raven never came back. The dove comes back on the third time with an olive branch. What does an olive branch signify? Peace. You found a place of rest. And you found a place of peace. The dove represents the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is feminine, okay? That's why it's referred to in the scripture that the dove couldn't find a place of rest. It's referred to as a she. Again, we know that the feminine has been largely submerged, in the ancient writings of this time. So the dove, white dove, is symbolic of the pure spirit of the goddess, of the mother. Okay? So when the dove comes back with the olive branch, you, aka Noah, have found a place of peace, a place of rest. Who was the raven? The raven is symbolic of the ego, and actually will become symbolic when we get further into it, when we start talking about a character named Satan. That's what the raven represents, because the raven represents that which is always attacking the spiritual. The flesh is always on attack against the spiritual, right? We talked about it in meditation. The lower mind doesn't want you to go into meditate, right? It gets taken out of the action. So our egos, the physical nature, is always inflicting upon the spirit. So the spirit or the soul needs to find a place of rest. That's what the story of Noah is all about. It's about you and going within yourself and finding a place of sanctuary, so that not only do you have rest from yourself, but you can be part of the renewal of your mind that Paul talked about. In other words, it means a couple of things when it says, be ye not conformed to this world. Well, yeah, it means that externally too. Don't do everything that everybody else does. But it's also saying, be ye not conformed to the world of your mind. Remember, the world is the mind, the earth is the mind in this symbolically. So in other words, don't be conformed by the state that you find your mind in. Be renewed in your mind. In meditation, this is what this story is telling us, is a way of renewing the mind. That's what the flood's all about. Kill everything off, meaning, the old ways, the old thoughts, the old ideas, that which plagues you. Get rid of all that stuff. Rise, be touched by the higher, and when you come back down off the mountain, because everybody always comes back down off the mountain, Noah and his sons end up coming, eventually the waters subside and, they come back down, and we'll pick that other part of the story up. But that's what the story said. You have to go to the high country, a high place, but it's within you, right? And that flood brings you into higher level of consciousness. You rest on the mountaintop, you come back out, and you're renewed. So that's really what the story is all about. Again, that was a very broad outline of it. You could go into more details, but you get the idea. Just like the Cain and Abel story, the Adam and Eve story, as we move through this, the point is, they had to give you the externals, because how else are they going to talk about what's going on in the process of your mind, especially the people, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. You're talking about, 1,000 years ago, most of the planet probably couldn't read and write. So that's why symbols are used and external things are used, because what else are you going to use that you would be familiar with, so that we could talk about these kind of concepts and that you would have a point of reference. That's why the stories are externalized, because that way then you have a point of reference, and now you have to put it in the context of the spiritual or the mystical. So anyway, that's Noah for now. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna take a little break for the remainder of December and the first part of January. Hey Tony, you wanna step up here for a minute and face the people and see if you got anything to say.
Yes, hello. Yes, to all our viewers and subscribers, Links and I we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we thank each and every one of you, all your comments and everything, with the work we've been doing. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
So we're going to
See them in January.
see you all in January. So until then, Links and I, both, we thank you so much.
Peace.